dark chocolate cake with creamy vanilla frosting, spooky chocolate nest, some candy jewels, and a feathered raven on top. Sounds spooky, right? My cake is out of the oven and I am ready to decorate. So I let my layers cool completely. This is our 1-bowl chocolate cake recipe. We have recipes for this online at marthastewart.com. And while they were cooling, I got 1.5 cups of chocolate over a double boiler. So this is just a little bit of simmering water with a heat-proof bowl on top with my chocolate. And I'm using dark chocolate for this. It's definitely good to use a chocolate with a little bit of a higher cocoa content because you're gonna want your nest to set up quickly. And milk chocolate or white chocolate tend to stay pretty flimsy and not very firm. So this is a 70% dark chocolate. This will just take a couple minutes to melt. I love using chocolate decor on a cake like this because the cake itself is relatively simple, but chocolate decor helps really take it over the top, and it's such an easy technique. When you see it, you'll be so excited because it's very cool and very easy to do. If you don't want to use a double boiler, you could also use a microwave. 30-second bursts, nothing longer than that because you can scorch the chocolate pretty easily. The chocolate's starting to get glossy, really smooth and shiny. There is something so satisfying about the look of melted chocolate. You want to make sure that this is melted completely because we're going to put this in a piping bag. I think I can turn this off and the residual heat will melt the chocolate. So I'm going to set this aside while I frost my cake. You don't want it too hot when it goes into the piping bag, so I'm just gonna give it a minute to cool down. Meanwhile, I have my cake layers here. They are completely cooled, and I'm just gonna frost them on a cake stand. I've made little parchment paper guides here to keep everything clean. You can just take a piece of parchment, cut it into 3 pieces. Now I'm just centering it on my plate. Now here I have a basic vanilla buttercream. It's on marthastewart.com as basic buttercream. It is an American style buttercream, which means it's just softened butter, confectioner sugar, a little bit of milk. Sometimes you can add vanilla. I like to add a pinch of salt, but it makes it really easy because there's no heat involved like a meringue buttercream. And it's just the right sweetness to contrast this chocolate cake. So I'm just adding a generous layer in the middle to sandwich the 2 cake layers. So now I'll add the other layer on top. I'm gonna flip it upside down so it has that nice flat layer to frost the top with. Make sure it's centered, press it in a little bit. And you can see this is why it's so great to have this little crumb guard, so I can just brush those off. So I'm going to start by frosting the top of the cake. I'm gonna get a nice, generous dollop on top, about half of what's on top. Then I'll leave this for the sides. So I'm just gonna start by smoothing it out. You wanna make sure you're generous with that first dollop because especially when you're using light frosting on a dark colored cake, you can get a lot of crumbs in the frosting, and I'm not doing a crumb coat. So you could definitely do a crumb coat if you have the time. You would just do a really thin layer, chill the cake either in the refrigerator or the freezer, and then frost it again. But if you're gonna do it in one go like I am, you can be very careful about making sure that your tools are clean, that you're using clean frosting. So now I'm gonna start adding frosting to the side of my cake, again using a generous dollop, and I'll just start wiggling it. You can see if I get crumbs like this, I wanna make sure that I push them onto the side of my bowl so that I'm not putting crumbs back onto the cake. I'm just gonna keep dolloping around the sides. As you can see now, I have a very rough layer on the outside of my cake, but it's a little bit faster if you don't have the time to crumb coat. Now I can just go around and clean it up. So I'm gonna spin the cake stand as if it's a turntable and just clean up the edges a little bit. So now that I'm done with my frosting, carefully pull these out from under the cake. All right, so now I'm ready to work on the chocolate decor. This is the raven's nest. So put that off to the side. And now my chocolate has cooled just a little bit, so it's thickened slightly. It's just not super runny at this point, but it still drizzles out. Just pour this into a piping bag. You could also use a resealable plastic bag if you want to. We're just making a tiny snip in the end, so no need for a piping tip here. Now unroll the edge of the piping bag. And here I have the same 8-inch cake pan that I baked my cake in, but this time I have filled it with vodka about halfway up the edge. You could use ice water too, but vodka works really well for this. This is a technique that chocolatiers use. I actually learned this one from Jacques Torres, who's a chocolatier here in New York. Basically, because vodka doesn't freeze when it gets cold, you can put it in the freezer, it's super, super cold, and then when I put my chocolate in, it's going to set up immediately. It's really cool. It's kind of like a little science experiment. It's super fun. So I'll just snip a tiny hole at the end. You can always go bigger, but you can't go smaller, so it's always good to start with a small hole. And now I'm just going to pipe it into this frozen vodka in a ring shape. Shape of the nest. So I'm just gonna do a few circles around. As you can see, I'm barely applying any pressure, and that's how you can kind of play with how thick or thin your lines are. So I'll just do that for now. And then using a fork, you can pick it up and pull it out of the vodka. Just like that. All right, so just go around again. I think this time I might make thicker lines. And the great thing about this is it's really an organic shape, so it's not meant to be perfect. You can kind of have fun with it. And the faster you go, the straighter the lines, the slower you go, the more wiggly it is. You know, branches aren't perfect, so I think for a raven's nest, it's a really cool technique to make an organic nest shape. I'm just letting this dry on some paper towels to get rid of some of the excess moisture. If you're gonna be doing this for entertaining, you'll want to pop it in the fridge when you're done just to make sure it sets up completely. Put our last few branches on here. The vodka's starting to get warm, so they're breaking, but you could definitely pop it back into the freezer if this is happening. All right, I'm ready to put it on top of my cake. If you were doing this for a party, I would probably make this part in advance and pop it into the refrigerator just so that it sets up. But I'm gonna go ahead and carefully move it on top right now. It's okay if it breaks because since these are supposed to be little twigs, it looks a little bit more lifelike if you have some branches sticking out, hanging over the edge. You can always put them back on top. Build up your raven's nest. Looks really spooky. When I saw this, I just thought it looked like a briar patch or some kind of brambles or something, and I just thought it looked so cool, and it's really fun to do too. Since ravens are known to collect really shiny treasures, I thought it would be fun if we had some little metallic candies tucked into the nest. So I have some silver coins. These, of course, have chocolate inside. I sourced most of these candies online, but sometimes you can find them at specialty stores. We have a great candy shop here in New York. And then some almond dragées. They almost look like little eggs, just little jewels that they picked up. When I was thinking of this cake, I was thinking about what I would want for Halloween, and I feel like we're all familiar with the classic ghosts and ghouls and creepy characters. So I was trying to think of something a little bit more elevated, something that felt chic and sophisticated that you could serve to adults and not just kids. And so I was going with this gothic theme, and I started thinking about Edgar Allan Poe and how witches usually have ravens. And I just thought that that was kind of a nice, chic take on a classic Halloween creepy animal. And then some more little chocolate candies. Not trying to overload it too much, but it's fun to have little candies peeking out from the nest. And now, of course, we're missing the raven. So I have our little feathered friend here. And I found this one online. Obviously, he's not edible. Props to you if you make an edible raven. But this one's great because it has these little wires attached to its feet that you can push down into the nest. So he's kind of perched on the side there. Quoth the raven, nevermore. I think this one is perfect to serve at your Halloween party. I think Edgar Allan Poe would approve. It's pretty spooky and tasty too. I hope you make this at home. Enjoy. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to like, subscribe. We have so many great fun videos on the Everyday Food channel.